Crasilneck from Dallas, Texas, and I am here being interviewed and look forward to these sessions. I hold the rank of clinical professor of psychiatry and clinical professor of anesthesiology at the University of Texas Health Science Center, and I'm in full-time private practice in Medical City at Dallas, Texas.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you start off by telling us how and where you were first introduced to hypnosis?
Yes, sir. A long time ago, in a place called Guadalcanal. I was attached to the Marine Corps. I knew nothing about hypnosis. I knew nothing about people who were subjected to this approach. But we had what was called a perimeter of defense, where two men were in a foxhole here, and two men here, two men way out there, here and here. One morning, two of my men, I was a sergeant at that time, a gunny sergeant, and two of my men came in and said, "Sergeant Crasilneck, something's gone wrong. Joe, who was in this open foxhole way out here, is asleep and we can't waken him." And I said, "What do you mean you can't waken him?" He said, "He won't budge." And I said, "Well, bring him in." They brought him in, and I tried to get his attention, and I could not. At that time, I knew absolutely nothing about hypnosis or people who had developed amnesia, but I did know that it was probably best to send him back to the medics, and so I had them take him back. Several hours later, I received a call from the Navy medic who said, "Dr. Crasilneck, we're going to have to use a method of trying to restore this man's recall, and we would like for you to come back and help us ask some questions." I saw this doctor, and he said, "We're going to use a method called hypnosis with your patient. He has a condition called narcolepsy. He's just blotted out who and where and what's happened to him out of fear." And so I saw him hypnotize this man for the first time. He went into a very deep level of trance, and in this very deep level of trance, there was a severe abreaction, screaming, hollering. We had to actually hold my Marine down. Finally, it came out that when he was a youngster growing up in New York City, he was phobic of somebody walking up behind him, sticking a knife in his back, and this was a phobia. He was always petrified of this happening. When I had sent him out on this periphery of defense way out in front of everybody else, he was afraid that the enemy would slip in behind him. The enemy would come in with a bayonet, stick it in his back, and this is the reason. He said he was so afraid of this he couldn't tolerate it, and so he just blotted out who, where, what he was, what his name was, and everything else. He did come out of the problem that he was having, and in about 3 weeks was able to go back to duty. And it was at that time that I said to myself, someday I'm going to give up killing people, and instead I'm going to work on getting people well. And I felt that this methodology that I'd seen this used on this man, hypnosis, had a place in my life, and so that's the first time that I ever saw it used.
Could you tell us who some of your important mentors or influences were as you learned?
Yes, Louis Willmarth was the most important person in my life as a teacher. He was a father figure to me, to my wife Sherry. He gave me a tremendous amount of training, and probably the most important thing he said to me, he knew that I was going out on an internship at Parkland Hospital at the end of my training in graduate school, and he said, "Now, Harold, when you go out, although you're attached to psychiatry, don't just work with people in psychiatry. Work with people in internal medicine and surgery and in pediatrics and in all the specialties in medicine." And I think that this was by far the most important kind of information that he could have possibly given to me. I think without doubt Louis Willmarth was the most important mentor in my life.
Could you tell us a little bit more about some of your training specifically in hypnosis?
Well, in those days, there weren't many people to train us. However, Lewis was my first mentor, and he was the person who trained us. He came to the University of Houston, and they were having workshops one summer, and I was assigned to be his chauffeur while he was in Houston. And an interesting story, I met him at the airport, and I said, Dr. Wilberg, I'm Harold Crasilneck, and I'll be your chauffeur while you're here. And he said, well, how long have you been a chauffeur? And I said, for about 6 hours. And he said, oh, well, that's fine. Let me sit up here in front with you. So he and his wife sat up in front, and I chauffeured them around for the entire time that they were there teaching on hypnotherapy to the students. There were about 600 students taking training with him and many others throughout the summer. And he just gave me tremendous insight and gave me tremendous kind of additional training on a personal level. As the years went on, they came to visit us, we visited them, and like I say, he was almost a father figure, and I was the son. My wife Sherry was the daughter that they wanted. We became very, very close personal friends, and his book was just outstandingly wonderful.
Could you share with us your own definition or understanding of hypnosis?
Yes, hypnosis is an altered state of consciousness in which we're dealing primarily with the patient's unconscious mind. So what the person says consciously means nothing. If they say, I want to stop smoking, it doesn't mean a thing. It's consciously, it's what it means unconsciously. If they say, I'm hoping this pain will come under control, let's hope that they also mean that unconsciously, because if they do, it'll work that way. If they don't, it will not. So it's the unconscious desire for this to work that makes it work.
How long have you been a member of ASH, and could you give us any historical perspectives of it?
I first joined SCEH in 1954 and was a very ardent member for many, many years, and joined ASH in 1960, I believe. I became the president of SCEH, and then as the years went on, I became the president of ASH. So therefore, I was the first person ever to have been president of both societies throughout the years. And this was an honor that I hold in high esteem. I've been active in both societies over a long period of time. I've seen tremendous growth and decline in both societies, and I think that the future is very fascinating to see what's going to happen. But the biggest problem, many people have said, what about an amalgamation between the two societies? Well, this is something that's been argued over the years, but so far nothing has occurred. What will be, I don't know. We're still working through on these issues and many others.
Could you comment on any changes you've seen in the uses of hypnosis over the years?
I think the most important issues is that those people who are trained to use it are using it properly in the kinds of problems that need this. For example, my study on people who have been burned, we were the first group at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School where there was a change in that psychologists worked with surgeons worked with anesthesiologists, and what have you. And so we were able to bring hypnosis into various kinds of clinical problems that occurred, like people who were burned. We were the first individuals to do this. The teaching programs have been extremely important over the years, and the weekend workshops, I think, are extremely important. Excellent textbooks have come out, making for wonderful changes in this topic. And I think that the heyday is over, where once some people took the attitude, this can cure everything. We now know that this isn't true. It works for most people 80% of the time, but the changes look good in the past, the present, and the future.
Do you have any predictions about the future of hypnosis?
Yes, I think it's here to stay. I think it's an excellent research tool. I think it's an excellent teaching method. I personally teach at the University of Texas, where I have been teaching for the last 50 years. And the students are tremendously interested in its approach to various problems that they see as medical students, and then later as residents and physicians in the field. And most of them feel that there's a definite place for hypnosis in medicine and in psychiatry and in psychology. I think the future is very bright. And I think that it's here to stay, provided it's used with good approach.
Do you have any personal stories about hypnosis that you could share with us?
I think the most important study that I've ever done was, as I said, people with thermal injuries. The chair of the Department of Surgery called me one day in 1954, said, "Harold, I would like to talk to you about people who have been burned." I had training in hypnosis when I was in medical school, and I really think that there's a place for hypnosis with this particular kind of injury. Would you be willing to work with me? And I said yes. And he said, let's go up and see this lady, and she's been burned terribly, 80% body surface burn, and she will not be with us for more than 3 days, but let's see if we can hypnotize her. Well, I said, I don't know if we can hypnotize anybody that's as thick, that has such little contact with reality and is in so much pain. And he said, well, let's try. Went up, saw her, hypnotized her, and found that she went into a very deep level of trance very rapidly. And that's where the dictum comes forth that we presented in our textbook. The sicker the subject, the better the response, and the more pain they were in, the better the response. She responded beautifully, and so for the next 6 years, we worked with patients who had been burned. We found that we were able to control the pain completely and totally. We found that we were able to use this for a form of anesthesia in the operating room, where they gave no other anesthetic other than hypnoanesthesia. It's called hypnoanesthesia. We found that we could control food intake. We've saved many, many lives over the years, not only with people who are burned, but with children who could not eat, and it works very, very well. So hypnosis has actually saved lives over the years, and then exercise and ambulation. And I do think that this is probably the greatest story of my life, the use of hypnosis in people who have been burned. And many other people elected to come into its use, people at various medical schools throughout the country and throughout the world. And it's been an honor to have worked with this particular study. My wife, Sherry, has been my personal research associate over the years, and it's been an honor to have her working with me as well.
Well, thank you very much for taking some time with us today, and hopefully we can use this for some additional training for others.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.